Sheinbaum's presidency has actually been more radical in both improving the lives of Mexicans and also on the international stage. Because Sheinbaum actually proved to be, first of all, more supportive of Palestine. It was under Sheinbaum that Mexico established a Palestinian embassy in Mexico. Sheinbaum greeted the first Palestinian ambassador. But she has also been a lot more defensive with regards to foreign interference. The main financer and the promoter of these protests is a man named Ricardo Salinas Pliego. This is actually the guy who's now turning into the George Soros of Mexico.
Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. We've got a very special podcast for you all tonight. We are going to be diving into what is going on in Latin America because I guess if the RAND Corporation documents are in any way, shape, or form correct, the U.S. is definitely placing a hyper-focus on the Americas now. I wouldn't say that it was 100% correct. I don't think they're abandoning their imperial ambitions in China and Russia, Africa, elsewhere in the world, but definitely a lot to say about what is happening all across Latin America. Joining me on today's episode to discuss all of this is a friend of mine. We have met in Venezuela twice before, and we had a great time there. Lots to unpack on those trips, but Denis Rogatyuk is a Russian-Australian freelance journalist, writer, and researcher based in Latin America, and he is the international director of El Ciudadano. So, Denis, thank you for joining me. It's good to see you again. The last time we spoke, we were in Venezuela, if I'm not mistaken, and now Venezuela is possibly at war. If you could, though, give me your initial thoughts on the events of the past few days, because it seems like the tone has, I guess, surprisingly been turned down a notch as the USS Gerald R. Ford has landed in the Caribbean. Trump is at the same time saying, well, maybe we should talk to Maduro. What do you make of this, and where do you think it's going, given that the U.S. simply just doesn't have the troop levels needed to do a real invasion in the country?
Well, first of all, Jackson, it's a great pleasure to finally be on Legitimate Targets. I've been looking forward to this for a while. To be honest, when we look at what the Trump administration has been doing with Venezuela, and when we actually look at the way he has dealt with other conflicts around the world and with other leaders around the world, I've seen this, I've analyzed this for a while, that Trump's way of dealing with this is actually not that dissimilar to the way in which sometimes he greets people. You've seen the handshake that he does. It's like he places the hand on the man's shoulder, and then he basically he shakes the hand and then he pulls. He shake and then pull. So it's this kind of shake and pull strategy which he's also undertaking with Venezuela. So the pull the kind of the hard pull has been the deployment of the of the naval forces, of the new Air Force stationed in Puerto Rico, new military exercises between U.S. Marines and the armed forces of Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, the bombing of various boats off the coast of both Venezuela and Colombia. So this has been his pull strategy. Now he's kind of back to trying to shake the hand with this, with these remarks that he's been saying that, well, I'm not really sure if we're going to strike Venezuela. And it seems Nicolas Maduro is open to conversation. So am I. And we also hear this in the mainstream media publications published, I think just yesterday, New York Times allegedly said that Maduro offered to step down after about 2 or 3 years, but Trump rejected that. Of course, I don't believe a word of that. I don't ever believe that Maduro would actually agree to stand down. I might believe it if Maduro said that he wouldn't run again as president. But just that line, I think it confirms that there is direct conversations that are taking place between Trump and Maduro, and even the fact that this is happening, this is already. This has already kind of changed the dynamics of what's going on between U.S. and Venezuela. But also, we can't discount here the presence and the the influence that Russia and China have had. both diplomatically and also in actual material and military terms. We all heard, of course, about the arrival of Il-76 planes directly from Russia to Venezuela, and these are massive planes. Imagine these are not your passenger commercial flights. These are huge machines that have been arriving to Venezuela. There hasn't been confirmation as to exactly what the cargo was, or if it has been personnel, but this was a signal to Maduro that no, Russia, despite what the liberal pundits and media have been saying, Russia has not abandoned Venezuela by any long shot. So the military presence is still quite there, and recently Venezuela and China have inaugurated two new commercial routes. One is a route directly from La Guaira, which are just off the coast from a little while from Caracas, and the port of Tianjin. A new maritime commercial route, and also a new flight route from Caracas to Guangzhou, if I'm not mistaken, through Russia. And this was happening all the while there were bombings of the fishermen boats, of the boats which were alleged to be drug traffickers. This is while as you were saying, JF Ford aircraft carrier was on its way and arriving to the Caribbean. So really, what has happened is that Venezuela has been pushed even further towards the multipolar sphere of the world, and I think Trump kind of began to see that. So I think in some ways Trump has always really underestimated and didn't quite understand the mentality and really the skill set of Nicolas Maduro in being able to forge and maintain these kind of strategic alliances. I think Trump basically lets Rubio dictate his entire policy, and finally I think now Trump is actually starting now to realize that, well, Rubio might actually just be a nutcase who's been going after Caracas and Havana his whole entire life. So maybe it's time to sit back and let me think for myself for once. That's what Trump might be thinking.
One can only pray and hope that he makes such a wise realization that Marco Rubio, yes, is indeed a nutcase, and genocidal and demonic, really. And he himself is actually associated with a lot of drug networks and drug cartels. So there's that too. Now, moving further north, right underneath the U.S. border, there was big events in Mexico this week, and a lot of people are questioning U.S. involvement in these events, major Gen Z protests, as they're calling them. They have the little Gen Z pirate, skeleton, crossbones, insignia on their flags. But behind the protests are the very, very closely Washington, D.C. aligned right-wing parties in Mexico who are showing, these 60-year-old guys showing out to the Gen Z protests, former president. And also, I think it's worth noting, and maybe you could explain this to begin with, as to why this administration, the Sheinbaum administration, is being targeted in Mexico. Really, the astounding success of the Morena party, a party that is little over a decade old. You look at any of the key economic or societal indicators that one would hope to improve with a new presidential administration, and this new political party has done, extremely unpredictable things in the best ways possible when it comes to, I can read a few off here, minimum wages under AMLO, the previous president who first got Morena into power in the presidency in Mexico. I mean, minimum wage went up 281% between 2018 and 2024. GDP growth increased 3%. 9 million Mexicans lifted out of poverty. Unemployment at record lows. The list goes on and on. They're nationalizing resources slowly but surely. And they also did things like Sheinbaum invited President Putin out to Mexico. Heaven forbid. So What can you say about this Morena party, and what should Americans understand about both AMLO, Sheinbaum, and the party as a whole, how popular it is?
Well, sort of, let me tell you a couple of three things about like the Morena, I say, foundation. What does it actually mean? Because even the name itself actually was actually a brilliant choice by by AMLO, because Morena is sort of like an acronym for Movimiento de la Regeneración Nacional, so the movement for national regeneration, short Morena. But Morena also means something else. There is this, well, in Mexico, there's of course this national tradition of the Virgin of Guadalupe. So Mary, Mother of Jesus, allegedly made her appearance in Mexico. Decades back, centuries back, and from there on, there was this legend of the Saint Mary of Guadalupe. But according to that legend, she looked. Her appearance was a lot more like what Mexicans look like. So, and she was called Morena. So as in like she was dark toned, she was dark skinned. So so she actually became the sort of like the patron saint of the Morena party as well, and still is. Like she has become so widely associated with this party as well, as it's a reflection of like the spirituality of Mexicans, but also like the humbleness as well. So this is a party that comes from the roots of the Mexican society. It represents the humble, the downtrodden, those who have been oppressed for so long in Mexico. And AMLO really symbolized that struggle as well, because even before winning the election in 2018, he was also the candidate in 2006 and 2012. In 2006, he came within just a whisker of winning it, and according to many reports, he actually did win the 2006 election, and it was stolen from him. And same thing happened in 2012. But in 2018 is I think is when the Mexican society kind of really finally awoke and saw in AMLO really this opportunity to finally leave behind the old sort of like this new two-party system that have been created between PRI, which is the party that governed Mexico for 80 years almost, between 1920 and 2000, and PAN, which was Partido de Acción Nacional, which is the more neoliberal and pro-US aligned vision party. So AMLO's presidency, and you mentioned all the facts, all the greats, all the great things. Sheinbaum's presidency, I would say, has actually, in my opinion, is actually been more radical in both improving the lives of Mexicans and also on the international stage. Because Sheinbaum actually proved to be, first of all, more supportive of Palestine. It was under Sheinbaum that Mexico established a Palestinian embassy in Mexico. Sheinbaum greeted the first Palestinian ambassador to Mexico, and she's also been a lot more vocal on this subject as well. But she has also been a lot more, how to say this, defensive with regards to foreign interference, both from other governments, like the attempts by the Trump administration to impose tariffs and other kinds of shenanigans, these threats of military intervention against the cartels, and basically Sheinbaum putting her foot down right now and saying, we accept all support we can get from anywhere in the world in dealing with the cartels, but what we are not going to accept is a full-on foreign interference, invasion, bombardment of anything of that sort. So she's been very clear in that, and I think that this is also partially the reason for such high popularity, which she still has. Even after all the shenanigans that happened on November 15th, the last poll that was released, I think just yesterday, showed she has 73% approval rating, which is, say, one of the highest in the world. Even in the aspect of security, safety and security, under Sheinbaum, the level of homicides has also decreased, say, dramatically. Sheinbaum and AMLO, I would say. There was one article which which I read from El País that mentioned that the level of that homicides have decreased by about 20% in the last 2 years or so. But this leads to this is now a segue as to these mass protests that have been happening. Now, allegedly, according to the organizers and according to most of the people who attended, this protest was against Sheinbaum's mishandling of the security crisis, and also the alleged corruption cases that have been going on in her administration. And this has also been sparked by the assassination of the mayor in the state of Michoacán, Carlos Manzo, who was assassinated in the city of Urupan by a 17-year-old kid, by the way. So hardly a mass targeted assassination that you would see otherwise. Two things here. First of all, is that Michoacán has been considered for a long time as one of the territories where the cartel influence has been strong for a very long time, way before Morena took power. Like, I know I was there myself when I first came to Mexico, and actually went there and interviewed some of the mayors there, and they were saying that basically in that state, this was in 2022. They said that regardless of the party, the cartels sought to first and foremost control certain institutions within the mayoralities and the state governments. There was absolutely they never cared about what party it was. So to blame Morena or Sheinbaum for this assassination is absolutely stupid and dishonest, and just ignores these years and decades of failed policies of the previous neoliberal governments against the drug traffickers. Now, coming finally to the Gen Z protests. Here you have a very interesting situation, because they basically the main organizer, the main financer and the promoter of these protests is a man named Ricardo Salinas Pliego. I would say, perhaps some people might disagree with me, but this is actually the guy who's now turning into the George Soros of Mexico. Mm-hmm. This is the guy who controls major media corporations like TV Azteca. He also has a chain of stores named Electro. So he's a multi-millionaire who originally in 2018 actually sought to support AMLO initially in his campaign, probably thinking that once AMLO is the president, then he would give some privileges to Pliego, and he didn't. So Pliego has always had this animosity towards AMLO, but lately he has actually been turning his media empire into a weapon of regime change against the Morena government. And these protests, it's interesting that these protests on 15th of November also coincided with a ruling by the Supreme Court of Mexico, where they found that Salinas Pliego currently owes $2.5 billion of taxes to the Mexican state. That's the taxes that he hasn't paid for about 40 years from his media conglomerates and other things. And he's also and also there are courts in New York and London who are going after him as well for similar reasons. And he has been nonstop on social media, on Twitter, everywhere, just promoting all of this, and even saying that he might run for president in 2030. So who knows? Who knows what happened there?
Was this the guy that showed up with the shirt on?
No, that was Vicente Fox. That's even worse. Vicente Fox. He was the president from 2000 to 2006, and he was the PAN. He is from the PAN party. Uh-huh. Now he's 83 years old. Uh-huh. So saying that he was out of place on an alleged Gen Z protest is a bit of an understatement in my image. Yeah, that's him. This is. Yeah, I mean, Vicente Fox really is a character in the Mexican
There's your
history.
Gen Z protests in
Yeah,
Mexico.
yeah.
Totally not artificial.
Well, not just that, but Vicente Fox is also he's kind of become almost like a black sheep, even among the right wing of Mexico, because mostly because of his insane Twitter tirades. Like last year during the presidential campaign, his whole Twitter feed was just filled with a whole lot of anti-Semitic messages against Claudia, because Claudia Sheinbaum has Jewish roots, but she's not a practicing Jew. She's not a Zionist, nothing like that. And
I saw her with the cross on one
that's
time.
right. That's right. And so, so she's a spiritually, I would say, in Mexico. You have to understand that in Mexico, even though it's a majority Catholic nation, but
Yes.
you also kind of have this. I would say, like it's almost like a Mexican spiritual Christianity. It doesn't involve you being part of any particular denomination, but rather you are culturally and spiritually Mexican, so to speak. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon. It also goes back to this Virgin of Guadalupe and legend as well. Yeah, so she's more on that line. Yeah. Vicente Fox, it's good that you mentioned that, but there are other kind of personalities that have supported this. Felipe Calderon is another one, although he didn't attend the protest, but he supported it. So he was the president from 2006 to 2012. These days, he's regarded as basically the main instigator of these massacres in the northern part of Mexico during the so-called war on drugs. So, and we are talking about anywhere between 40 and 100,000 people being killed in that conflict between 2006 and 2012, as a result of the actions of the Mexican government, allegedly fighting against drug cartels, but really targeting bombing so many towns, poor towns, and near the U.S. border. And there are also like some smaller Mexican actors which are worth mentioning here. There's also another kind of the two kind of key figures of the PRI party. One is Alito Moreno, who is the president of the PRI party, and another one is Alejandra Rojo de la Vega. She is the mayor of one of the main boroughs in Mexico City. So these two basically also portray themselves as the new generation of PRI. But Alejandra Morena, especially like she seems to think of herself as the Maria Corina Machado of Mexico, and actively trying to promote this image of hers fighting against the dictatorship.
I saw her. She did like a Fox Spanish interview.
That was Lily Teles. That's another one. Lily Teles is the same.
She seems like the Maria Corina Machado. She was calling for a U.S. invasion of Mexico. Psychopath.
Well, yeah. I mean, they seem to be competing between themselves. Who can be the Machado of Mexico? But actually, yeah, that Lily Teles is actually probably the worst of the bunch, because not only does she demand the invasion of Mexico, but also she is, without mixing any words, she's a rat. As in, she was elected in 2018 as a senator from Morena. So she actually joined the party at the high point, so to speak, just to get herself into the Senate. And then 6 months later, she resigned and joined PAN.
Wow.
So she's literally a rat in political terms. When she owes her whole political career to the man that she now wants United States to eliminate, basically. So she's a traitor.
Yeah, it's insane. So a lot of the similar actors that are calling for the overthrow of Maduro are the same people who are kind of backing these protests in Mexico right now.
That is also true. I would say the extent to which they've been calling it's not quite as strong as I thought it would be. There was also because there was an investigation done by the Milenio, which is one of the largest newspapers in Mexico, and it found that there were 8 million bot accounts in Twitter X, in Instagram, and Facebook, TikTok, whatever, promoting the 15th of November march. 8 million bots. A lot of these were basically created. Most of these were created within Mexico, and I assume I think Ricardo Salinas Pliego is the one who was behind it. But it was interesting to see the campaign has been mostly inward. They didn't try to reach the international arena quite as much yet. There were a few kind of international actors that have, spoken out, in support of the protests. I think one of the one that hasn't shut up about it is Representative Carlos Jimenez from Florida. But that man is basically tweeting every 30 minutes some, one threat or another against Maduro or against Mexico or against Cuba or anything else. So this is your typical gusano from Florida. So there are no surprises there.
Well, I think that it's quite clear what's going on. I don't think it's going to be successful if, I guess, the goal is to overthrow Sheinbaum. I don't even know if that's the goal, though. I mean, I do want to address a few more things before. I don't know if overthrowing her is the goal. Maybe pressure, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of pressure on her from Trump, on tariffs, on the strikes. Who knows what will come of it. I want to ask you, though, before we wrap things up, first about Ecuador, because as the U.S. is trying to flex on Latin America and say, we're going to do whatever we want. We're going to bomb, overthrow, invade whoever we want. The Ecuadorian people have said not so fast. They voted, I believe, overwhelmingly against the establishment of a U.S. base in their country. But explain to me what went on here, because usually the U.S. just controls a government and they make the base and no one gets a vote on it. But that, I guess, is not the case in Ecuador.
Well, that's right, because the current constitution of Ecuador, which was written and approved in 2008 under the presidency of Rafael Correa, it specifically prohibited the establishment of any foreign base in Ecuador, and it's also prohibited the entry of any foreign troops, at any point or for any mission. So, what's Daniel Noboa, the current neoliberal president, whose whole family is also involved in drug trafficking, and I'm not joking. Like, you really have to see to believe it. If you Google Noboa trading cocaine in Belgium, you'll see that there is literally a company with his name that was caught smuggling cocaine into Belgium in crates filled with bananas. And this president's father, Alvaro Noboa, is first of all the richest man in Ecuador, and also a banana magnate. So he has built his whole life on producing some bananas. So a bit of background there on the president. But with regards to the U.S. to this vote that took place on Sunday, it was a referendum that's on several questions. The two key ones, as mentioned, one was on the U.S. military base, and the other was on the creating a constitutional assembly to actually write a new constitution. Now this was actually quite surprising to me that Ecuadorians actually did mobilize so massively against this, because Noboa and his government and his allies and in the media all across have been pushing so much for this. They're basically saying that the only ones who can save us from drug traffickers are the people that consume the most drugs in the world. Which I think this is the kind of message that didn't quite resonate with everyday Ecuadorians, because they understand that when you have a president so heavily linked with drug trafficking, whose whole family is so linked to drug trafficking, stationing 2,000 U.S. troops in the Galapagos Islands is probably not going to fix that problem. What is going to fix this problem is reestablishing a proper socialist government that can deal with the main precursors of the problem. Poverty and actual foreign interference from other countries. The reestablishment of sovereignty of the country. So really, this was a rejection against Noboa and his policies, not just this whole idea of the U.S. military bases, because Noboa has been an absolute disaster for Ecuador. Ecuador now has the highest murder rate in the Americas. I think it's even approaching Haiti's. It might actually be worse than Haiti's this year. And this is a country that was the second safest country in the Americas under President Rafael Correa. There were maybe about 4 homicides for 100,000 people in 2016. Now it's about 50. So, you can just look at the numbers and see what a disaster neoliberalism has been for Ecuador.
Yeah, I guess to finish on a more positive note, there were elections in Chile over the week, right? And in the first round of elections. Now, I don't really know too much about Chilean politics, so I'm not going to act like I understand what's going on here. But there's a ostensibly left, maybe anti-imperialist candidate who's running who actually won the first round of voting. But explain it to me, because in Latin America, there's kind of 2 lefts. There's the left that says, we'll go along with the United States in pushing this wokeism, the going so heavy on the social values and the LGBT, and they kind of don't pay that much attention to the economic and sovereignty issues as much. And then you have the other ones like Maduro and like the Ortega family, and they are obviously very good and principled on the most important issue. So what is going on here, and who are they running against in Chile?
Well, Jackson, unfortunately, the predominant current on the left in Chile has been the first one you mentioned. So more on the social progressive, more sort of wokeist, more pro-US as well. Unfortunately, the current administration of Gabriel Boric in Chile has been overwhelmingly pro-US on so many issues, with some exceptions like Palestine, for example, and being just a little less hostile to Venezuela and Cuba than the United States. Sometimes saying they oppose the sanctions against Venezuela, they oppose the sanctions embargo against Cuba, but otherwise, unfortunately, the majority of the Chilean left has been much more aligned with this, I would say, like this U.S. progressivism. But the candidate that won the first place in the elections on Sunday in Chile, Janet Jara, is kind of an interesting character, because she is a Communist Party member. She was the Minister of Labor under Gabriel Boric's government, but her agenda, I would say, is actually is her agenda and her proposals. They are much closer to more of the everyday bread and butter kind of things that people need, because she emphasized throughout her whole campaign is that what this country needs is to dismantle, the old, neoliberal Pinochet created neoliberal system. That the country needs, stronger labor rights, better minimum wage. So actually, more like what AMLO was proposing and doing in Mexico. She really seemed to tone down this whole, the social things, wokeism, or and all these other issues, because at least she understood where the country is right now. And where the country is right now is actually on a very dangerous crossroads. So, because the other 3 candidates that candidate came second, third, and fourth actually represent the different sort of strands of neoliberalism and what I would say actual neo-fascism in Chile. Because the second place came Jose Antonio Cast, who is kind of been like a perennial, far right candidate in Chile. Now, this guy is full on pro Pinochet. This is a guy who admires Pinochet, and his own father was an actual Nazi, an actual member of the Nazi Party, and who fled to Chile after the defeat of Germany in World War II. We also and also when you have a surname Cast in a 90% Hispanic country, that also sets off the alarm bells. But he's actually not the worst candidate. The worst candidate was probably a man named Johannes Kaiser. Yes, that is a name for a Chilean candidate, and I think you can tell what kind of ideology he was aspiring to. Which is the only difference between him and Cast was that his main idol was Javier Milei in neighboring Argentina, but otherwise he espousing the same kind of neo-Pinochetist fantasies as well. Now, the way things stand, just to summarize, the way things stand is that there is a risk. There's a huge risk that that the right and cast could be the next president of Chile, because Gabriel Boric's presidency was a disaster. So many failed promises of changing the constitution, of bringing in actual labor rights, of trying to actually make Chile a sovereign state again, instead of still being like this neo-colony of the United States. So Boric failed on so many fronts, and Jara, even though she has distanced herself from this, still is going to have a very tough time convincing the majority of Chileans to keep following this path. So on one hand side, it's it's great that she won the first round, but on the other hand side, for the second round, there is a great worry that that Chile could have a neo-Pinochetist president again.
Well, hopefully they don't go down that Malay sort of route and this total neoliberal Reich once more. Hopefully they make the right decision, and hopefully this Janet, is that her name?
Janet, yeah.
I hope that she doesn't go down the same road as Boric, because I remember as soon as Boric got elected, I remember that, and I looked at him online. I looked at what he was posting, and you can just tell right away. I'm like, oh, this guy's a total fraud. This guy's gonna suck, and he did. So hopefully she learns from his mistakes, and Chile can take a true sovereign path. But Denis, thank you so much for joining me today. Where's the best place for people to follow up and stay up to date with your work moving forward?
You can find me on X, showing like at Denis Rogatyuk. You can also find me on Instagram, same thing, my first name, my surname, Denis Rogatyuk, Denis Rogatyuk. Same on Facebook. But most commonly, you can find me on El Ciudadano. That's www.elciudadano.com. As well as recently, I've also joined the GFCN Global Fact Checking Network. So you'll be seeing more stuff from me posted there.
Very good. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jackson.